Hey friends, I'm Greg Nettle, and I have the privilege of serving as president of Stadia Church Planting, where we help you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation. Welcome to the Church Planting Podcast. I'm excited today because I have my dear friend, longtime friend, Don Hamilton on this episode. Don is a respected pastor, author, and speaker with a heart for church planting and leadership development. He's authored several books, but most recently, Lead Like a Bodyguard, 52 Timeless Leadership Lessons. I love this book. I'm in the midst of it right now. We're going to be talking to Don about some of these lessons today, how they affect multiplication, church leadership, and your personal life, most importantly. Really excited to have Don Hamilton on the Church Planting Podcast with us. Well, I'm really excited about this episode of the Church Planting Podcast because I have a dear friend, a partner of Stadia, really just a confidant and someone I respect immensely, Mr. Don Mark Hamilton. Don, it's so good to have you on the Church Planting Podcast.
Well, thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. It's good to see you as always, and I appreciate you inviting me to share on the podcast.
Don, it's so fun. I recently got a copy of your new book in the mail, Lead Like a Bodyguard, 52 Timeless Leadership Lessons. And, you know, we were just talking. I mean, you just celebrated a big birthday and said it was one of the best birthdays of your life.
Yeah, big 7-0. Hard to believe.
And here you are writing. I mean, one of the things that I love about this is that at 70, you're producing as much or more than you ever have, right? And you're sharing your wisdom. Thanks for doing that.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it.
So
when I retired, I had to decide, well, what do you want to do with yourself? And I'd done a lot of writing. I thought, well, I'll just become a writer. So I'm working on a couple other books right now, too. So
I just love it. I just love that you're sharing the wisdom. Now, Don, I want to dive into the book, but before we get into the kind of the meat of the book, and, you know, we have lots of church planners listening, multipliers, church leaders, and so forth. Yeah. But one of the examples that, you know, that you have set for me and for thousands of others is just your example in marriage. And you and Gail were married for how many years, Don?
38 years.
38 years. And then Gail kind of succumbed to cancer a few years ago. But in the it just simply says for Gail in the front of this book. Talk about a little bit about Gail and her passion for multiplication, and why you dedicate this book to her.
Okay. Well, Gail, of course, was we had a great marriage, a good life together, and we had done most of our ministry together. She was the worship director at our church for many, many years. She was also a nurse practitioner, and we loved church planting. Well, that's what brought us here in the first place to the Northeast, and did a lot of traveling throughout the world and worked on planting churches and got to do a lot of it together. We were pretty blessed in that way.
So you guys, just your marriage, it was dedicated to God's kingdom, to each other, to your children. I mean, I've just watched it firsthand, and the legacy of your family is absolutely incredible as well. But the legacy of your church planting together also, it's hard to imagine the impact of that. And the legacy continues with this book, right? I mean, talk about what some of the proceeds are going to with this book.
Well, we started the ministry, Gail's Girls, that supports female leaders in Southern Asia. And so 10% of all the book sales will go to Gail's Girls. And we've been raising money for that ever since Gail was ill in 2016.
Gosh, Gail's Girls, huge Stadia partnership as well in South Asia, and we can't even say the country where it is because of to keep the safety of our church planters, intact there. But the proceeds will help raise up women in church planting in a country that desperately needs the hope of Jesus, right? And Don, I don't know. I mean, I've got it. I mean, lots of churches now have been planted through Gail's Girls. I don't know exactly how many, but I mean, dozens at this point. And so So talk about the lead. So where's the concept from lead like a bodyguard come from?
It's based on the story of Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah in the Bible. And years ago, my very first master's class, I was in church growth and leadership, and I had a professor named Charles Cook. And he had us read a book in a leadership class on Nehemiah. And I just kind of fell in love with it. And so out of it, I ended up developing a strategic planning model that I used my entire ministry and for my personal life, actually still use it. And so anyway, I kind of walked with Nehemiah. I just really think it's a great book, and he's an interesting character. But I've done it for many years. A local publisher had asked me to produce a small kind of a pocket book on leadership on Nehemiah. And once I started writing it, I decided, nah, you just want to write the whole book. So,
I mean, this is 52 timeless leadership lessons, beautifully hardbound. This is not a little pocketbook now. So, talk about 52. I mean, what's the intent of the 52? Is it to read one a week? How's it supposed to be read? How's it supposed to be, kind of taken in?
Sure. Well, of course, it's based on the fact that it took 52 days for Nehemiah to rebuild the wall. And every page of Nehemiah just about's got life lessons, leadership lessons.
Yeah.
And so the lessons really, although they kind of go through the story chronologically, it's not the kind of a book that you got to read cover to cover. You can jump to any one of those lessons, whatever looks appropriate to. They're very short chapters. And I start out actually by telling Nehemiah's story, but I do it in a historical fiction manner. So I add a lot of characters. I fill in the blanks and how I think things might have happened. And then the leadership lessons are woven into the text of the story. And then they're brought out, for the rest of them. So yeah, you could do. I have some people reading it that just want to do one a week, or maybe a staff is doing one a week, or there's just a number of different ways that you could do it.
Well, I've loved it, and I mean, as I'm going through it, I mean, I just see so many leadership lessons in here that I've learned myself and would affirm and go, yeah, and then others that I need to learn and put into practice. But chapter 9, leadership lesson number 9 is just simply no good work goes without opposition, and I thought that would be a good one for us to jump off on just a little bit and have you talk about that as we think about church planting and church leaders in general. No good work goes without opposition. Yeah.
I mean, if you're anything worth doing, somebody's going to oppose it, or you're going to have. It may not be in the form of people. It might be resources, or you're building with buildings and stuff like that, zoning laws, all that kind of stuff. But somewhere in a project, and you're going to come against opposition, and sometimes it kind of broadsides us because. Usually when we start something, we're excited about it. We've got a vision of where we want to go, what we think needs to happen. And then whatever, a month later, reality sets in, and not everybody else is so keen on the idea as you are. And so you got to deal with that. And Nehemiah, in his story, he met with a lot of opposition from a lot of different sources. And so there's a lot to learn from him in that.
Well, and specifically about, you point out that a leader leads through the opposition. That's, I think, we need to go when we're planting churches, when we decide to be the tip of the spear, if you will, and say you're a senior pastor and you're going to multiply your church. We need to know that out on the tip of that spear, expect resistance, expect opposition, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually one of the signs that you're doing something.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
About the most quiet place you can go to is a graveyard. Nobody ain't doing nothing.
I don't want to miss that. One of the signs that you're actually doing something, moving the kingdom forward, is that you will face opposition. And if you're not facing opposition at some point, you kind of got to ask the question, am I leading in the right direction? Would you find that to be true as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you don't have to be in the middle of opposition all the time, obviously.
I hope not.
But but there's going to be a lot of it, I think, of a church is moving forward. And it comes from, like I say, from outside sources, it comes from inside sources, and it comes from your own mind. You can be your own opposition. I've done that many a time.
Yeah, we all struggle with that. Okay, so you have a couple chapters in here, I noticed, that are kind of on celebration, time for a party. Explain that a little bit.
Well, the book actually starts with a Nehemiah. I call him Nema in the story, and he's sitting on a portico overlooking Jerusalem, and they're having a huge party down below. He's sitting with his friend, the high priest Eli, and they're discussing, what has happened. And what you find out as you read through the book of Nehemiah is that from the very beginning, Nehemiah planned a party if the project got finished and when it got finished, because I think he understood a basic leadership principle that you've got to celebrate, and you have to celebrate milestones along the way. And then if you're doing something big, or you've done a great accomplishment, there needs to be a time of celebration. And if you don't do that, it's demoralizing to people. I was always a visionary, and the way I led, and sometimes I got called on it. We would be doing a big project that I had come up envisioned, and it was going great, and it get 2/3 of the way into it, and I've moved on to the next thing mentally. Yeah. And what are we going to do next? And everybody else ain't there. And a few times, like, dude, let us enjoy this first, okay?
Yeah, John, this is such an amazing principle, but I'm just going to own up to this fact right now. You're saying that Nehemiah planned the party before the project started. I have never noticed that, and I
think he knew in his mind, this is what's got to happen, and he already understood. There's a reason why these people are so downtrodden. They're such a mess. It wasn't just about walls. It was about they had allowed their whole culture to degrade over 120, 130 years.
So he's not just building the wall, he's helping build the people.
Yeah. He knew that wall would just be symbolic. It would be protection, but it would be symbolic. And that people they were going to need to celebrate that. It was a big deal. I mean, that was a big wall. You think of that was 40 feet high, 12, 15 feet wide, 2.5 miles around. That's a pretty big project when you're doing it by hand.
It's a pretty big project when you're doing it with a machine. Hey, you talk, another thing that comes out in these chapters that's so important. Chapter 13 is simply don't forget to honor your team. Talk about that, because most of our church plants these days are done team-based. And most leaders out there planning churches have a team around them. Talk about what you've watched and the lesson of honoring the team.
Well, I think first of all, when you're the point person, the key person, you have a much greater chance naturally of getting accolades, just by virtue of being the leader. But a wise leader, to me, knows there's the people who got you there.
Yep.
And you got to recognize those people all along the way, and recognize, I think, not only in the midst of things, more than just saying thank you, that, okay, what's this person's personality? What trips their trick? What really says thank you to this person? And then the same way with your team, and I think you can plan into long-term strategy on projects, new programs, whatever, I'm going to plan into this to make sure systematically that I show appreciation to my team and make sure that they understand that I know who got us where we are, and I appreciate it.
Okay, so you led your church that you planted for decades, and and you had a team around you. It was a big church as you finished up there and passed it on. Give me some real practical, so is it just praising them, honoring the team one-on-one with you in your office or out at a coffee shop, or did you do it in front of the whole church? Talk about at a really practical level for our listeners and watchers.
Yeah, I think I did. I tried to do at least a little bit of everything. And I think, again, some of it I think is personality based. Some people, recognizing them in front of the congregation is a great thing and they love it. There's other people in your team half the time that, no, they don't like that at all. And so I think you recognize that and you don't do that. But I think then you can plan in, like you say, so in the midst of a project, you take so-and-so to a coffee shop, take them out to eat, or maybe it's a gift certificate. Maybe, especially if they're younger, they don't get to go out much, and so you get them a $100 gift certificate or whatever to a restaurant. I always plan retreats. Every year, I wanted to have at least one staff retreat, one elder retreat. And a lot of that was a thank you in the form of it was just fun.
Yeah.
We had a blast. I usually had some learning experience with it too, but it was just, you guys work your tails off and we appreciate it. Things go around.
So good. Okay, Bodyguard Tactic 43, so relevant in our time right now. You just simply say, watch yourself. And before we started this podcast, we were kind of talking about some moral failures we're watching around us in leadership. Talk about this principle of watch yourself, please.
I think, again, by virtue of being a leader, it has great positives, but it has great temptations. And be it a male or a female, your leaders are attractive to people. Maybe not to everybody, but
leadership and power, authority, all of that is a magnet a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And so you've got to, I think you got to watch yourself as far as not letting that power go to your head.
Yeah.
That immediately puts you in a position of vulnerability that you have done. And then also recognizing people that they are, you recognize, I better not spend too much time with this person. I better make sure I set the environment for when I'm around this particular person. And that's not just, attraction, sexual attraction things, but other reasons, that you need to have. And then a lot of times I think you need to have, that there's situations where when I'm with this person, somebody else needs to be in the room.
Yep.
And again, that not always about me female attraction, male attraction. It's about what they're going to say you said.
Oh, wow.
And can be very detrimental. Then you run around, especially there are certain people, let's face it, that are just kind of that way. And if you don't watch it, you run around just putting out brush fires all the time. If you're in a room of people when you're handling certain things like that, then everybody knows what was said.
Man, I just want to emphasize this lesson that Don's saying and writes about in this book. And there's more, in this than what we're sharing right now, and watch yourself. But friends, right now, I mean, it is just a huge blight on church leadership in the United States right now, is moral failure and misconduct and so forth. So, just want to really encourage all of our listeners, take this to heart. Watch yourself. Listen to what Don's saying and teaching from someone who's finishing well himself. And I know you got a long time to go and a lot more to do, Don, but
Sure.
We'll say in the, maybe fourth quarter, maybe we'll see, but and you got to finish the game well. And there's so much truth to that. Don, before we finish out, I want to talk about this. One of your lessons is called Tackling the Change Monster. And I think that's probably one of the hardest challenges for anyone in leadership, church planting, is how do you tackle the change monster? And what's the leadership lesson there?
First of all, I think you recognize that a lot of change is a slow boat headed upstream. And it takes patience and perseverance and finesse. And then sometimes it takes, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I think one of the wisest things that one of my mentors was a business trainer, and he says, reframe it. You're not changing something, you're improving something.
Oh, good.
The language that you use around change is critical, because none of us really like change in certain ways. And Jesus was right, amazingly. Nobody who has tasted of the old says he likes the new.
Yep.
It's better. So, and that goes that way for all of us. And again, I think then recognizing the levels of, you got the early adopters, you've got those that'll come on board. And I think when you're changing something, especially if it's pretty big, a large programming factor, you're changing your worship service, you're changing some program or something, I think I always tried to identify specifically in my strategy, all right, who is these people in this category? I know they're going to be on board right from the beginning. And who do they influence? And then the next category. Okay, this category is a little bit bigger, and these people are going to get on board a little easier. But how do I get them on board? And chances are I can get them on board much more quickly than the ones that are going to come in after that. So in the strategy, I think in order to change something, then I've got to address that group. And change is all about communication. So how do I communicate to that group? And what do I communicate? When do I communicate it? And so forth. And then, then it kind of, I wouldn't say it goes downhill, but it becomes more difficult, as you know, than the other groups that they adopt much more slowly. And then you have that group of people, and I think this is really important. I don't care what you're doing, going to do. They ain't getting on board.
Yep.
I've seen leaders, including me, spend 60% of their mental energy on a group of people that are never going to get on board. No, that's okay. They don't have to get on board. And sometimes they need to get on another train.
Yes.
And if they do, they do. But that's where it kind of crystallizes, well, no, this is where we're going. And I'd love to have you get on board. But if you don't, I understand. That's okay. And but that group can occupy a lot of your mental energy, and the group just kind of above that are very slow adopters. So to me, with slow adopters, you have to be patient about things, especially if you're making a really big change. Like that stuff just usually doesn't happen very, very quickly. And often I think if it does, it ends up not lasting because it wasn't well thought through. there wasn't a strategy for the long-term follow-through of it. So yeah, I mean, I think it's but I think the language, the communication, and I think doing it strategically, so that you kind of expect, all right, here's what's going to happen.
I love that.
This is another one of those times you're going to get opposition if you're changing.
So the book is Lead Like a Bodyguard, 52 Timeless Leadership Lessons by Don Hamilton. Don, you can get this on Amazon. You can get this basically on anything online, your local bookstores, and
all formats and pretty much
all kinds of, all formats. So I so appreciate that. But man, this is one that I think I'm going to be referring to over and over again on myself. So it's nice to have the hardback edition where, that I can take notes in and so forth. All right. This is, Don, here's a question. This is not in your book. It's not a leadership lesson. I have just benefited from and watched because, a couple of your daughters have been on staff at Stadia. Andrea is just, killing it with Stadia right now, and so fun. So I've seen the output of you and Gail in the area of parenting. And so leadership, I mean, maybe that's in your next book is 52 leadership lessons on parenting. Wow, I'm not kidding. But give us some, I mean, a lot of us have kids, right? And we're church planters, they go on and like they're planting and their wife's pregnant, or, it's so common. What's something you'd say, hey, here's something we actually did right with our kids?
Oh, man. I think one thing, and it's funny, I just had 70th birthday party, and my kids all went around the room and told me what they liked about me.
Oh, nice.
Which I'll take that any day. I think it's having fun. I stopped going to church when I was a teenager because it was just boring. I was not doing it. And there was some negative talk. My dad had a bad experience. It's like, so I thought, well, if I ever go into ministry, I'm going to make it fun. And, obviously can't always be that way, but I think sometimes kids grow up in the pressures of a church, and they look at that, they see what's going on in their parents' lives, and they say, I don't want that. And they'll never say that, but they'll live it, So I think that was important. I think Gail and I just really tried to let them know that we're always there, and we love you no matter. Our love for you has nothing to do with what you do and your performance. And it wasn't something, I guess, that we deliberately did. People ask me this quite a bit, and I think, I don't know. I just did what I thought was right. But and I think as far as just living a Christian life that is an enjoyable life, it's not a rule-based. I grew up in a rule-based home.
Yep.
I'm kind of rebellious. Like, that ain't going with me. And I never liked rule-based churches. I still don't. And I think, again, the Christian life just has to be enjoyable. And even the sacrificial part of it, I think, can be enjoyable. I don't know if that makes sense for me, Greg. That's a tough question. People ask me that often.
Well, the reason they're asking you, Don, is because you've done such a good job. So, Don Hamilton, thank you for this episode of the Church Planting Podcast. I look forward to our next time together.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. We'll see you.
Thanks for listening to the Church Planting Podcast. The Church Planting Podcast is part of the Stadia Podcast Network. To find more great episodes and to see how Stadia can help you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation, be sure to check out stadia.org/podcasts.